Welcome to the fourth episode of the Skills Factory, talks and ideas about skills from Europe and beyond. You're listening to a podcast series done by the European Training Foundation, European Union agency working on the topic of human capital development in the EU neighboring countries. In our first episode, we've discussed whether inclusive learning is a myth or a challenge. Our second episode was about the skills for the future. Then we spoke about whether the future of education will be fully online. Today, I'd like to introduce you a new interesting topic: green entrepreneurship and green skills. What is it and why is it important? In the past decade, there has been an increasing awareness towards the ecological challenges and consequences of climate change. Some countries already understood the importance of the green transition and invest heavily on greening their economies, like South Korea, with 7% of its GDP going towards this goal. European countries are facing an enormous challenge as well. They try to intensify efforts for expanding and sustaining economic opportunities, and at the same time, they try to address growing environmental pressure. Green enterprises and green entrepreneurs, or ecopreneurs, could become a win-win solution to address current economic challenges and tackle the transition to a carbon-neutral economy. In the European Union, 97% of enterprises are small, and eco and green industries support some 3.4 million jobs in the EU. But in order to make the green economy a reality, in the upcoming years, we need to reach a critical mass of people that would have a green mindset and green skills. And today, we'll speak about green skills and how people can acquire them. And we'll have an opportunity to speak to a real ecopreneur. I'm Maria Lvova, and let me introduce you our guest for this discussion. Today, we're speaking with Dragana from Serbia. Dragana is a founder of a Danish startup that aims to reduce the use of pesticides in farming by leveraging artificial intelligence and knowledge of plants' own immune systems. So Dragana is a perfect definition of what a green entrepreneur or ecopreneur is. Welcome, Dragana.
Hello.
And Anthony Gribben, Senior Expert Entrepreneurial Learning Enterprise Skills, ETF. Hi, Tony.
Good morning.
So to start our conversation, Dragana, could you please tell us your story, a story of a real ecopreneur? Where are you from and when you decided to set up your startup and why?
Well, that started, I think, in my family because I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I also grew up in northern region of Serbia called Vojvodina, very famous for agriculture. So I grew up in this having this green mindset, and then I continue my studies when it comes to crop protection and food security. And this is actually the place where I learned at the University of Belgrade Faculty of Agriculture. It's where I learned about different farming systems. I also did in Serbia my first PhD, where I was also working on innovative molecular methods, how to reduce pesticides and introduce more biological control agents. Then I continued my research in Denmark, where I could really, and this is also the place where I did my second PhD on climate change effects. And it's basically the place where I learned about the greenest farming ecosystems in Europe. And further, when SDGs came out, it was a collaboration between Stockholm Resilience Center and Copenhagen University, where I was a part of that. And I could see that if we work cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary, that we can really solve pressing problems in our society. And this is also where I got this drive that, yes, I'm doing this, I'm stepping out, I'm going to connect all these scientists. And this is how actually the story of Fauna Smart Technologies started. But yes, our vision is to farm in line with nature.
In terms of the market, so what exactly Fauna Smart, your startup, sells to people? What is it?
Yes, it's basically right now it's testing as a service that we want to leverage and make products for real-time in-field decision-making support. Because I think this is actually where technologically we are capable right now to have real-time in-field devices, but then it's also like, what do we want to leverage? What do we want to measure? And for example, it makes perfect sense to measure plant immunity because in last 5 to 10 years, science got this knowledge about how plants react to different pathogens in the environment on a molecular level, on a biochemical level, and now it's time to put that in action. So it makes perfect sense, like if immunity is active, shall we spray plants? Shall we reduce the number of spraying? Shall we introduce biological ways of crop protection? So this is the thing, we want to leverage scientific findings using diverse technologies. That's why it's Fauna Smart Technologies, using technologies in a smart way to empower fauna, to empower biodiversity and this natural control that existed before us humans kicked in with chemical pesticides and killing that intelligent plant communication. So
Dragana, was it a big jump, like from being a scientist, that your academical background is about science, and to become an entrepreneur? Was it a big jump, a difficult one?
Yes. And of course, when people ask me, was I scared? Of course I was scared. Although I do come from a family where I could see the patterns where, you know, my parents were exposing themselves to like some higher risky projects. But of course I was scared. But I think this is also the factor of growth. If you feel scared, just go out there still and do it, and you will grow as a person. So I think, scare yourself on a daily basis.
That's a good piece of advice.
Yeah.
Tony, but what can be done to help entrepreneurs like Dragana to start their own business and to overcome these initial fears and doubts?
I think people like Dragana are already on a good footing because they have all of this extra knowledge and the extra skills which go with science. So that makes people like Dragana a little bit more confident than probably the wider population of people. So Dragana is extremely in an advantageous position. The only thing is, and maybe Dragana can ask this, you know, out of all of the alumni that were with her in both Copenhagen and at her university back home in Serbia, how many people went off to set up their business? Dragana, tell me, do you know?
It's less than 1% that actually think about it, right? So I think this is also something quite important it's thinking about it, even that it's like less than 1%. Yes.
So the reason why I asked Maria, the reason why I asked Dragana that question, first of all, it's generally about in terms of making career choices. As we move through our schooling systems, and certainly for me, it was quite traditional. I was expected to go through upper secondary education, then into third level education, maybe master's, PhD. That was the track. At no point along the way did anyone ever say, would you like to start your business? Now, that's from the schooling side. However, my father did. And like Dragana, I come from a farming community. Yeah. My father expected all of us to somehow, we would have to connect in with the farm and keep the farm going, or the farms going. Yeah. That really wasn't my scene. Yeah. And I knew that from the beginning. But what my father was interesting, what he said to me, we had, I don't know if you remember, but years ago, they used to have what these called milk rounds. So this would be someone who would be responsible for going to a dairy to pick up all these pints of milk and fill up crates and put them on the lorry and then go round doors. And this is what we had in Ireland. And my father said, and you bought a milk round at that time. You would have to buy the round. You had the ownership to a certain district. And my father said to me, this is an idea I have for you. Would you like to? And I thought,
maybe not.
Well, maybe if he'd introduced the idea when I was at 11, but he introduced this idea when I was 18, and I was already fixated on university.
Far
So
too late.
that's
Far
the way it was. So it was too late. It was too late. At 18, of course, at 18, you know what we're thinking. I'm leaving home. I'm going to university. My life is beginning, you know. So the thing is, I think the point here is, at what point do parents introduce a possible idea of entrepreneurship as a career option moving forward? And at what point does our learning system, because we spend more time at school than we do with our parents.
Yeah, that's true.
But the schooling systems didn't and still don't, except in more progressive schools, really look at entrepreneurship and say, listen, hey, boys and girls, this could be an option going forward for you. Now, the second thing, of course, is, you know, Dragana had, she was extremely, as I said, an advantage that she already had a family background, which was in business, and she already had all of this technical knowledge and skills, which she could turn into a business proposition.
Yeah.
That's now, if 1% of the university students in Dragana's class, or 1% of whatever, move into entrepreneurship, the question is, could we have more Draganas every year? Would the university, you know, be able to establish a policy where youngsters coming in first year arts or sciences or whatever, and they are already introduced to career options? Frankly, that doesn't really take place. And certainly when entrepreneurship does come on board, it's usually from another medium, like parents or someone outside, or even just the get up and go of the individual. Now, Dragana's got a really interesting business. I think it's the right time.
Yeah.
Dragana spotted that there is, society's awareness is changing about the importance of our environmental pride and environmental protection. So that's that's picking up on that opportunity. But most entrepreneurs out there won't be thinking that way.
Yeah.
You know, most entrepreneurs essentially are people, if you read through the literature, most entrepreneurs are people who, the real motivation for setting up a business or becoming self-employed is, the real motivation is not money.
No.
It's not having to work for someone else. Those are lifestyle choices that each of us have to make.
You're right, it's a lifetime choice, but when we're speaking about people working in green, it's also a matter of their vision of the future.
Yes. Yes.
Dragana.
Exactly. It's like you really want to make that future a default. This is how I really see it. It's like there is a great opportunity. We have maturity in science, we have maturity in technology. So now it's time to marry those two on so many levels and really create the new world. For me, that's the whole change of perception. What is food? How we grow food. So for me, it's really the whole societal change. Society needs this change, and society, as exactly as Anthony said, society is aware of all these now problems that we do have, and that's actually where I'm taking advantage of it. And this is the thing with innovation. You can have amazing innovation, it's about the timing. And this is where I could feel when SDGs came out, that now it's going to be building of this awareness more and more. And I could feel, I call it also environmental empathy, what I feel for our environment.
Dragana's point about timing, crucial. Yeah. Timing has opportunities. But the other thing, just listening to Dragana, is essentially, it's about passion.
Yes.
That really has to be something coming from your soul. It's something that you believe in, and that you will commit to, because being an entrepreneur, of course, has its ups and downs. It's not all an easy ride.
No.
But in order to have the passion towards green and the passion to create your own startup, you need to have a certain set of skills, right? you need to have a certain knowledge. So my question to you both is, when is the right moment to give this knowledge to youngsters so they can have a choice?
Is ageless. You step out when you have something to say, and that's your own personal growth, your own personal moment. And then again, when it comes, I think this is the moment where it's like environment, society is ready now for this. As Anthony said, we needed more in education, that this is also a way for a scientist to contribute to a society. So I think there's a lot of things that we can leverage across our education.
Yeah. When to introduce it in the education system? I think we have to look at it as, I'm coming back to this this thing about passion. It's the messages that we give to youngsters, essentially from preschool right up. The messages that we give to youngsters define their vision of the world. But also, I think it's important that through the education system, but we encourage and facilitate children to understand why curiosity is important. That they should learn to ask questions, that they should learn to be critical, but they also should be learned to, when they identify a problem, they should come forward with their own solutions. And I think this is problem solving which is missing very much in our education, getting youngsters to understand that there will be problems along the way. Life is essentially a series of ups and downs, whether we like it or not.
Dragana, from your years of experience so far, what was the most difficult part of setting up your own business? Logistically speaking, very, very down to earth. What was the most difficult part of setting up your own business?
For me, it was like really like setting up the right team of people. Startups, they go up and down. So if you can ever feel a bit down, then you want to have somebody in a team to kind of pick you up. And so we pick each other up, right? And that's why we need to be, all of us need to be fueled by the same vision. Like, we really want this to happen. And so I think, like, from that perspective, it's the team. It's really always the people. I think innovation is really, it's the people, how they are led, how much they really are into, like, I jump, yes, we jump with you. I think that's so important.
Anthony, the question of the century: entrepreneur or green entrepreneur, born or bred?
Okay. I think the evidence is coming out now in different places, US, Europe, and beyond, that education plays an incredibly important role. Students exposed to even one education module in third level education, they demonstrates that they're more likely to set up a business, and the business they set up are more likely to be sustained. So yes, education does play a part. One of the difficulties, of course, is that in wider society, there's this notion that you either have it or you don't. You're born or bred. It's the nature-nurture debate. And I continue to hear this. I hear this from politicians. You can hear it on television. I read it in newspapers. Even some academics, I hear it from. You either have it or you don't. There has to be something there. It's in the DNA. It's in the genes. No, it's not. No, it's not. Everybody has the potential. It's an environmental issue. If you grow up in an environment, I think Mrs. Dragana is a really good example. She grew up in a family of businesses. That's a great starting point. And many people who grow up in a family business, or where there are other family businesses, are more likely then to themselves, because it's already sort of featured, well, this is what they do, and then I can be that as well. So it's the can-do thing, The other thing is that I think generally inside the education system, I think it's about teachers playing a different role. Teachers not only teach, but the teachers now are expected to play so many different roles, almost like quasi-parental advisor. Teachers have to step in when youngsters are having their little little things in their lives, particularly around teenage years. But I think as we move through life, youngsters start to understand that some of their big objectives are just not achievable, but it's readjusting that mindset. But as Dragana says, it's about a mindset, but I think the mindset has to continuously adapt. Just as Dragana was saying, new science will bring in new results. It will have new implications for how policy is happening in the economy and how policy is happening in agriculture, whatever.
Dragana, what would be your advice to people from our audience that might listen to us and think about setting up their own business and maybe even a green business? What would you recommend to them?
To, if they really feel it, to step out and do it. It's really like I think if you're creating something new, you need to create that path for yourself. And while you're creating that path for yourself, for your business, you're kind of giving also this example that, yes, exactly as Anthony said, it's the I can do mindset. And I would also say that if somebody tells you like, no, you can't do it, then just go out there and do it twice. It's simply, you need to have this grit. You need to have this kind of like, I know that I can do it, really. And it's just somehow, maybe right now you don't have clear picture and the mechanism, but you really need to trust that it's going to happen. So this is the thing, go out and do it.
Tony, there are several global ratings about countries that are the best for entrepreneurship. When we think of those countries, first that could come up to our mind would be Denmark, South Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore. But EU neighboring countries are usually not in the top 20 or top 50. And still we know of some amazing standalone cases of young entrepreneurs coming from Balkans or from Eastern Europe. So what is missing? What should be done to facilitate entrepreneurs?
Looking at the broader set of entrepreneurs, I think we need to, and the potential for more and better, more successful entrepreneurship, is there needs to be formal support systems in place. Now, it's fine to have that great idea, which Dragana and I have been talking about in the past. But if it's totally unrealistic, it's going to be a flop, you're going to lose money, then somehow you need someone to step in and support you there. But one of the things that, and a lot of investment is made into, is supporting business planning. Is my business idea viable? Is the market ready for this idea? Is the market already overcrowded? These sorts of things are going to be so important. Secondly, how much money will I need in the first year, 18 months, 2 years? Where do I get that money? Is it going to be my own funds? Generally, people use their own money. Most people will borrow on their own savings. So that's quite an investment. It can be scary. It can be scary if you have already started a young family and you've got a mortgage on your home and you've got the car to run and your school fees to pay. This can be scary. So those sorts of things need to be taken into account. And of course, then it's moving. Actually, do I have the am I able to pull on this and to build my own informal system, which will keep me going through all the ups and downs? Yeah. So I think it's the formal and the non-formal which need to be thought about particularly. Now, in terms of accessing finance, which is usually the biggest stumbling block, frankly, I don't think, we have, for example, you talk about the Western Balkans, Maria, is that we have a relatively developed good banking system across the region. And then behind that, we have these bigger banks, the development banks. And for example, EBRD is one of the key banks in the region that lend out to intermediary banks, and then intermediary banks then become the reference point for potential entrepreneurs.
Dragana, you come from Serbia, but you founded your startup in Denmark. Why?
Exactly these reasons that Anthony is talking about. It's a way better access to capital. It's already, I think, a way better ecosystem that is more advanced when it comes to entrepreneurship. And I could see that simply also because adoption of new technologies by the farmers, it's tremendous. It's again #1 in Europe. So it's easy actually if you approach to a farmer that if you say that yes, this is science-based, they're totally going for it.
So we know that we're facing a big economic crisis, a crisis that is a consequence of a health issue with COVID-19. So what is the future of entrepreneurship in post-COVID world? A lot of businesses are closing and they might never actually reopen afterwards. Do you think a lot of people will consider becoming an entrepreneur? And do you think that people will consider actually to become an ecopreneur? So to start up something in the green?
Yeah. But I think like the solution to every crisis is innovation, and I can see that there's more and more calls for scientists for multidisciplinary approach. I could feel that like really coming, and it will continue actually coming up even more. It's the time for startups, because this is the thing, like it's the change that we can do is basically from a day to day. So you have a really steep learning curve, and that's really important. So I think it is about the startups. That's why I'm also doing this. It's really about the startups. So from this evolutionary perspective, as a life scientist, I think like it's really startup is a prime example of a rapid contemporary social evolution.
Tony.
Actually, Maria, I see your question having really two answers to your question having two axes. Certainly, yes, I think there's going to be opportunities as environmental technologies evolve. There's going to be more emphasis on these. I think there's certainly a lot of more public interest, policy interest in that area. So there is a potential for more green startups, or startups that are actually focusing on improving our environment. So I think that probably will be people like Dragana. These are people who are the higher level skilled people. But at the same time, and this is the other axis, this is about green entrepreneurship, is also about all those existing businesses out there, and they're going to have to reset many of their operations. They're going to have to rethink their production processes. They're going to have to retrain their staff. They're going to have to, adapt their products. And moving forward, products will have to be much more environmentally respectful. So those are the two issues. So I think we're going to have a green. I think Dragana used the word evolution. Maybe what we need is a revolution. And a revolution means how different is it from evolution? A revolution means that we really need very, very strong leadership. And strong advocates, and that people believe in, and we believe that this change process is necessary. Evolution is certainly something that's much more bottom up and whatever. But I think we have to look at from evolution to revolution. So that would be my prognosis moving forward. And where does all of our entrepreneurship ecosystems fit in between those two ideals?
So an entrepreneur is an amazing human being, but that needs a support and an ecosystem to flower and grow, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to Dragana. Thanks a lot to Anthony. I think we're wrapping up our episode here. And thanks a lot.